Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's Planning and Licensing Committee. And there are just one or two things to remind you of, and welcome to members of the public and to anybody joining us on the Zoom connection. If you would, whether it's members or members of the public, if you're moving around the museum, if you would please put a mask on as soon as you're seated. You're very free to move it. And again, members, if when you're making your comments, if you can speak up and articulate so that the machinery manages to get your words of wisdom clearly. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Before I move to the agenda properly, welcome our new member of the governance team, Tom Delaney, who has moved south in search of better weather. I think it was northwest Leicestershire, wasn't it, Tom? And also to thank Jo Morley for her time. I think she leaves at the end of the week. So I'm sure committee would wish to wish her well in her next position. So thank you very much. So we move to the agenda, please. Do I have any apologies?
Ross, Lowe, Harvey and Payne this evening.
Please confirm the minutes of the licensing committee held on 29th of June. Thank you, Councillor Oxley. Second, Councillor Ball, I saw just before you, and those in favour, please. And abstentions? Thank you. Any declarations of interest under item 3? Councillor Oxley.
Just to say, Mr. Chairman, I do own a holiday let in Uppingham, but I don't think that that will have any impact whatsoever on the application we're looking at this evening. I did actually mention it to the solicitor before we came in, but given the fact that people who stay in my holiday let are interested in staying in Uppingham, I don't think this will have an outer difference to that status.
Looking to my right and the left, so I would entirely agree. I would think yours is a rather more substantial property than the ones proposed. Yes,
yes.
Thank you. Petitions. Sorry.
Chair, yeah, I like Councillor Oxley here. I own 2 holiday lets in Caldecott, and I don't think they would have any bearing influence on the decision for this.
Thank you very much. That was Councillor Andrew Brown for the record. Thank you, and I'm sure the same comments apply. Sorry, have I missed anybody else? Thank you very much. Petitions, deputations, and questions. The agent will be speaking to the one item we're discussing tonight, and at that point in the agenda. So we now move on to the substantive bit of the meeting, which is the planning application. The formula will be that the Officer of Sergeant will present in a moment. When he has done that, I will ask the agent, Mr. Osborne, to come forward. He will have 3 minutes to make his points. Members will then have 3 minutes to ask any questions, at which point we will then move into the debate with, again, the ward member having the opportunity to speak first, should he wish to do so. So with that, Mr. Hodgett, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. For the purposes of the recording, I've moved on to the first slide that shows the aerial photograph that identifies the location of the site, which you can see is to the east of the A1, which is the yellow line. You can just see the Woolfox quarry on the left-hand side there, and Greetham Valley Golf Course, and the former Woolfox airfield just to the northwest of the application site. The site is actually the land at the front of the existing golf course, and you can see, and you'll see on the later slide, that the golf course does extend further forward. So this application relates to just over half of the total area of the existing golf course. And there you can see the red line shows the actual application site, and then the retained area of golf course is in blue. The proposal is for 60 lodges and the creation of lakes and the conversion of the existing buildings associated with the golf course into staff facilities and clubhouse facilities, similar in that respect to those of the golf course as they stand at the moment. The proposal does involve the loss of some of the holes of the golf course towards the front in the red line area, but it is intended to retain 11 holes in the blue area at the back, which may in future be remodelled to make a traditional, better 9-hole course, but that's something for the future. That's the next slide. Again, this is a closer view where you can see the outline of the blue up there. The application site is this area here. The access into the site is off this road that runs parallel to the A1. You've got the lane there that goes to Pickworth. This is the actual access to the site. The cluster of buildings are in here. There are some private dwellings there, which you'll see on a later slide, and the application site basically relates to this area at the front. It does include that area there, but will remain as it is at the moment. So that just shows you the existing access off that road that runs parallel to the two carriageways of the A1. The application does propose to widen that access to 7 metres wide for a good distance back. And you'll see in the addendum that I've included an additional condition to ensure that work is carried out, which unfortunately we omitted to include on the original report. That's the view from the south looking north along that parallel road towards the access to. The next slide is from the north looking back in the opposite direction. Again, the access is there next to the photographs, and you can see the screening alongside the A1 that separates the B road from the A1 itself. That screen has now matured somewhat more than that photograph, which I think was taken in 2011. And a similar view actually from the A1. You can see the access to the site where that white sign is beyond the hedge there. This is the access into the site on the next slide. That would be widened for a certain distance back. This slide, again, I'll point out various parts of it so that you can see what's what. The access road comes up here from the B road. There's an arm off there into the existing car park. You'll see from the report that permission had been granted for a substantial commercial development previously, which was in this area, which is now some open grassland. And here is the existing driving range, which the balls fire out towards the A1 in that direction. This is the main 2-storey stone-built clubhouse, and these are the buildings that are used as part of the maintenance of the golf course. These buildings at the back are separate farm buildings that are operated by the farmer that lives in this bungalow here. You'll see that again on the photographs later. So if you bear in mind where this range of buildings is here that's going to be converted, you'll see that this end closest to the residential property is basically going to be staff quarters, and the main commercial activity, if you like, is going to be in the original clubhouse, which is in its existing position. So along here, there was 4 cottages here. 2 there and 2 there. The access to those cottages runs along this lighter line here and continues along, and that seems to contain part of the bridleway that crosses this part of the site, and then it disappears off across that field. And then in front of that is an existing hedge, and in front of that is a path that carries on around, and that would be the access road to the machinery shed, which again I'll show you in a minute. And then there's an existing path here that just accesses the current golf course. And that's a slightly wider view. So the proposed machinery shed will be in this area here, which is basically an area of scrubland that's been used for dumping various materials that have been ancillary to the golf course. So the application site roughly comes across here. So these golf holes here will disappear, but the remaining 11 further to the north will remain. So this is the revised master plan. The original master plan that came in had more lodges in this area, which were closer to those cottages which are there. Following representations from the residents there, the applicant rejigged the layout such that the nearest lodge is now there, which is, again, you'll see another plan of this, it's 64 metres from the nearest cottage, and then beyond that, the next nearest is 90 metres, and the rest of them are at least that distance away. So this green area would be a new tree screen, which would be in front of the existing hedge, and that track that would lead round to the new maintenance store there. So basically there would be 3, 4, 5 lakes that would be interlinked, and then the erection of these 60 lodges basically set out around the lakes. There would be no vehicle access to the lodges in this area, so there would be no vehicles near to the residents up there. There is vehicle access and parking with the individual lodges down here, so that's not such an issue, not such a concern. So, yeah, this slide shows the nearest distance. That's, you can't read this, that's 64 metres there. Then you've got at least 90 and 100 plus on some of these other distances. So that's the farm bungalow, single cottage, and a pair of cottages there. So this is the ground floor layout of that existing set of buildings. So the clubhouse is that element there, and then this is the range of maintenance buildings. That area in the middle there is open, it would be landscaped, and then all of this area here is staff accommodation. So anybody coming out of the clubhouse over there would be further away from the residential properties, as is the existing clubhouse. Again, that's the first floor plan showing the same. There's 2 bedrooms above that area and some offices above the area further down. That's the view of the new machinery shed, which also includes a toilet for the golfers, specifically because some of the existing members have requested that facility be provided across near to the retained site because it's a relatively long distance back to the clubhouse. These are some sections through the site. They're so small, it's a bit difficult to show exactly what's happening, but basically you can see that the lodges, while some of the biggest of the lodges is about 7 metres high, it doesn't come any higher across the landscape than the existing clubhouse does at that end. And then I'll go on to talk about showing you the landscaping further on. Just another view of the section, it's difficult to see. That's the new layout around the existing buildings and the car park. That's an example of how the lodges would sit between. These are the ones down. The medium-sized lodge has, they've all got grass roofs, but the medium-sized lodge has an area of grass that slopes up to it and becomes a continuation of the roof down to ground level. So this is the large lodge, which is 7.3 metres high at its highest point, and as you can see, it's got just a small amount of accommodation in a sort of a mezzanine level. It's proposed to have a green roof, and there'll be some timber cladding, and as you can see, the specification for the other parts of the walls is local limestone. That's the floor plan of the large lodge, and then the medium lodge, as you can see, it's got this area where the roof carries down to the ground so that it's better screened. That's only single story. And then the small lodge, well, that does have a mezzanine level as well, with the delivered green roof. Photo tour, and this is on the way up from the access drive. You can see that 2 rows of new trees have recently been planted alongside that driveway, and you can see the golf range on the left-hand side, which would remain as it is. That's looking back down towards the A1. The area plan to the right is the field in front of the golf range. And that's a bit closer to the A1. You can see a lorry actually on the A1 there. And then that's looking to the left with the A1 beyond the hedge, which shows the existing bund behind the hedge along that side, which would be retained and increased in height and subject to further landscaping to screen. And that's the area that would be in front of the lodges, but the lodges are about 200 metres back from that front boundary towards the area where the lodges would be. The nearest would be 200 metres back from the front boundary. That's from the area in front of the existing maintenance buildings, looking right back down the driveway towards the A1. That's the back of the golf range. This is the end here. These are the farm buildings at the back, which are not part of the application site. And just off the photograph to the right there is the bungalow that belongs to or goes with the farm. That's a view further to the left of House and Stone on the left there. And that's the farmer's bungalow. And beyond that, you can see the first of the cottages, which is now one property, and then there are two more cottages beyond that, which are accessed on this drive, and then you can see in front of that is the hedge, and beyond that is the track that would lead to the maintenance store. That's a view out of one of the far two cottage windows across the existing site. And there would be some new wood planting in this area as part of the proposal. And then that's the track to the maintenance shed, which is already there. So in terms of planning policy, you'll have seen from the report that there are policies in both in the National Planning Policy Framework and in your own development plan that are supportive of this application, and yet there are others that perhaps aren't so supportive in terms of particularly the location of the site and its sustainability with regard to attracting car-borne traffic. I think it's an existing use on the site. The policies do allow the expansion of existing employment uses in the countryside. This is clearly quite a big scheme, which is why it's come before you for a decision rather than a decision that we would have normally made ourselves. But I think we've tried to balance up the various policies, the fact that it's an existing establishment, what would happen if the site wasn't redeveloped and rejuvenated, and the fact that it's going to create from a current 17 full-time equivalent jobs up to 63 full-time equivalent jobs. So on that basis, we thought that in terms of it being unsustainable, yes, it possibly is, but it's very easily accessed off the A1. It doesn't pull traffic through adjoining villages. There will be charging for electric vehicles, which in the future will reduce environmental impact of cars travelling to the site. So on balance, we've considered that it would meet the policy in overall terms, particularly with the economic benefits that would come with the scheme. In terms of residential amenity, which is clearly one of the concerns of the neighbours in those cottages, they're concerned about traffic and noise. As we pointed out, the nearest lodge is over 60 metres away, beyond what an existing hedge and what will be a new landscaped area. The converted buildings would have staff quarters nearest to that end, and there's no vehicle access to the lodges adjacent to those residential properties. So again, with the distances involved and the way the site's been revised on its layout, we feel that meets policy SB 15 in particular. In terms of the visual impact, you've seen from the photographs that the site is reasonably well screened, both from the A1 and from Pickford Lane. There's a good hedge along Pickford Lane that screens the site very well. You really have to struggle to stop to look through that hedge to see the existing buildings. And there's a landscape impact assessment that's been carried out, which concludes that there would be very limited visual impact, particularly with the remodelling and the new landscaping that will be carried out. And I think officers are quite happy to accept those conclusions. In terms of highway safety, Highways England did have some concerns initially. It wasn't clear whether they actually realised that access wasn't directly off the A1. But following further discussions with Highways England, they've got no objection, neither has your own highway authority, provided that additional condition is attached as set out in the addendum. There was also some concern from Councillor Beggy at the briefing, I understand, about the possibility of cars queuing to get to the check-in facility. I've spoken to the agent about that. The check-in is 200 metres off the road, which is potentially apparently about 40 cars nose to tail. And the fact that the road's going to be widened, and it's unlikely that that many vehicles will arrive at the same time, so it's not thought that that's a particular concern. There's a condition requiring more archaeology work to be carried out. And other than that, we've balanced up. We think that with the impact on the scheme adds to the economy, the little impact on the wider area is recommended for approval. John?
Thank you very much indeed. Let's come forward. When you're ready, your 3 minutes will start.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Riddle and his father acquired Rutland County Golf Course about 18 months ago, so pre-COVID. Your council granted planning permission for it in 1990, at the back end of the 1980s golf boom. Sadly, in recent years, golf has actually been in decline in terms of the number of rounds played. There are 15 clubs, 15 courses available to Rutland, Peterborough and South Kesteven residents. Rutland County was in decline, which was why it was available, but there was a danger that you might be left with a white elephant in the countryside. Mr. Riddle is a Stamford born and bred, and he's been looking for some time to invest in this sort of project as a long-term commitment. Absolutely fortuitous. It turns out that the site that he could invest in is almost literally on his doorstep. But it's something that he's been intending to make his livelihood in the long term. So this is not just an application to gain planning consent, flip it and move on to something else. So since acquiring it, as the slides show, in good faith, he's invested in a range of general improvements, begun to do some landscaping works, renovated the clubhouse and so forth. Now, I don't need to tell you that the visitor economy is an important sector of Rutland's local economy, attracting over 1.7 million visitors a year, generating over £113 million and supporting 1,600 jobs. That's your local plan speaking. Your report asks whether the use is sustainably located. But I look at it like this. I holidayed in Shropshire last year, and I'm looking forward to Northumberland this year. And I don't think I'm the only person who is discovering the delights of staycations in Britain. There's an awful lot to see. That might mean driving around the country in my car, which happens to be electric, but the alternative would be to drive it to an airport and catch a flight, probably long haul to somewhere very unsustainable. So I think we know which is the, excuse me, the least unsustainable option for holidaying. Then I view this as a proposal which is actually firmly targeted at a market which has and actually will continue to grow faster than I think even Mr. Riddle expected when he bought the site, and one that is actually dead in line with county policy. Scheme will bring new visitors to Rutland. Mr. Hodgett has mentioned the job creation, but also ensures the continuance of the existing employment. Most importantly, actually, it's about the quality of the offer. Bespoke designed lodges by a local architect using wherever possible local materials. In a landscape and biodiversity led
We're about there as well, but if you could just wind up, thank you.
I will do indeed. The design, the layout was very much led by landscape ecology and hydrology. The lodges are fitted into that, but it retains the driving range, it retains the golf course as public facilities along with the clubhouse. So we think a good mixture of uses. So I ask you to support your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, you have 3 minutes. Councillor Gordon.
Sorry, perhaps.
Oh, sorry, I've got Councillor Legge, who I looked in
That's
your
fine.
direction
I'll
first.
So just a couple of questions, because I've been involved in this sort of thing in the past. You talk about adding to the Rutland tourism business movement. How are business movements? Like, is this like the Centre Parks model, whereby you park up and stay on site for a duration, or is there freedom of movement where we do expect visitors to be going into Rutland that are sort of more so south?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think Mr. Riddle's original intention is, it is very much his intention that people come to stay, hence the driving range, hence the residual golf holes, the intention to run activities, and those activity space in the clubhouse and in the building conversions, so that people can come and enjoy, or if they leave, they do so along the footpath network, bridleway or whatever. But I think inevitably people will explore the wider parts of Rutland, and your highway officer was most concerned to have some idea of what the wider impact of visitors might be on the local road network, and she was satisfied. So inevitably it will be a balance of both.
I think you've got a second one.
No, that's more for the planning officer later.
Thank you. Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, Mr. Hodgett has set out very, very clearly, and of course in your address you started and made a number of mentions about the commercial side of it, but I think there's one clear issue here, is that your assurance, if you like, on behalf of the applicant as to minimising the disruption of noise generally, and the sort of existing conditions held by the three cottages and the three residents who are in fact represented or here this evening. I think that is key to have that assurance from you that the various points outlined in the various changes made are going to happen, and that in itself is going to be monitored going forward to make sure that there are no issues that we haven't thought of already.
Absolutely, and firstly I ought to apologise that Mr. Riddle can't be with us this evening for reasons beyond his control. Otherwise, I'm sure he would answer that question himself, and would like to. He has attempted right from the beginning of acquiring the site to strike up a dialogue with the residents to understand their concerns. The point is, as I say, he will run this as a business himself and will be responsible for it. So there is absolutely no intention to try and alienate himself from the residents. And I'm absolutely sure, having got to know him over the last 18 months, that he'll do his damnedest to stick by his word and minimise the impact. There is no benefit to his business to upset his immediate neighbours. Probably the most critical thing, actually, or one of the critical things I would just add, is ensuring that we don't interrupt their free flow and that of the farmer as well along Hardwick Lane. So hence the point about avoiding the risk of queuing at check-in is very much of a concern to him, hence exploring electronic means of doing that, just to prevent that delay, to prevent the road being blocked, and therefore to prevent the risk of upsetting the neighbours by causing them disruption.
We are strictly speaking out of time, but I have seen two members indicating, in fact I've now seen three indicating, I am going to exercise my discretion. If you could please, members, be as concise as possible in your question, and if I could ask that you were equally concise in your reply, Mr. Oswald. I've got Councillor Gordon Brown, Councillor Mark Oxley, Councillor Blanksby, and Councillor Andrew Brown, in that order. So Councillor Gordon Brown, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question regards the sustainability on the site. And I'll note that we have effectively 225 bedrooms in these lodges. And I'm just wondering whether the clubhouse has the capacity in its current form to provide the meals and bar facilities that I presume it will have, already has, for 225 bedrooms. This is even 150 bedroom hotel. I'm just questioning what we would be asking in those terms. And if it doesn't have those facilities, then are we having an issue with creating traffic coming in off the site at all hours of the day and night? And people go out for a meal, come back at much later in the evening. So I'm concerned about that. And I'm concerned that this is the on-site facility for visitors. Is it really sustainable from that point of view?
We think so, having done a lot of research on comparable schemes elsewhere. Lodges are self-catering, aimed at families who we think will largely cater for themselves. The clubhouse will provide some alternative. Some people will want to go and use local village pubs, but very much focused on self-catering.
Thank you. Councillor Moulton.
My question was regards signage. What plans are made? Because I think it would detract from the existing if there were large signs erected pointing people to various locations. So what plans are there for telling people how to get to their lodge and where the different sites are?
For on-site signage, that will be part, I think, of an electronic package which will guide you through once you've signed in with a QR code or some system like that. Off-site signage will be subject to the approval of Highways England, because it will be off the A1. So.
Now I'm talking about a large sign just to advertise the fact that they have arrived.
No signs are proposed in this scheme, so I think if there were to be a large sign, I suspect it would be subject to another plan.
Okay, right, thank you.
Councillor Blacksmith.
Yeah, my question is about the infrastructure. Is the infrastructure there for the electricity supply? And if it's not, are you going to try to use renewable energy through photovoltaic and such like on the lodges?
Short answer is yes, it is. They're including the approach towards sewage treatment, which is probably more important than electric supply in terms of how it's dealt with. The pre-app looked at the possibility of either solar or even a wind turbine to provide electricity. That wasn't something we included in this current application, but my client is very much, as I am, concerned about how that happens. So again, that might be something we want to come back to you with a further application at some point.
The other thing is the foul water drainage. What are you proposing to do with that? Are you going to treat it on site or?
Yes, it's a packaged sewage treatment system. It's a packaged sewage treatment system which has been devised by our hydrologist and drainage engineer, and I think has been approved as technically feasible.
And will you come back to that? Come back to that one once you get further forward.
Thank you, Councillor Blacksmith. Councillor Andrew Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder what the maximum capacities of the different lodges are, and whether there'll be a minimum stay requirement, because I know from my own experience that we don't allow one-night stays because that can attract single sets, large groups who just go there to have a party, and if that's the case, there may be possible disturbance to the neighbours. So I wondered if you're going to have a minimum stay requirement.
Short answer to that is I don't know. The long answer is, to keep that short as well, back to the point that it's really aimed at families, but I suspect commercially, if you've got a lodge which is available and somebody wants it for one night, then that booking's not going to be turned down. That's really not the direction. We want people to come and stay and enjoy the whole place. Golf, and you can go for walks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Stover. You can retire to the front row. Thank you. Now, members, I'm sure you're aware and have read the addendum report. Thank you, Vice Chairman Councillor Payne, for raising that particular issue. When we move into the debate, and should you be minded at the end of it to approve, I would intend to take that extra condition as part of the proposal, just for the sake of clarity, if you're comfortable with that, members, it seems to be the straightforward way of proceeding. So having said that, would you like to start, Councillor Ball?
Yes, well, thank you, Chair. I think initially just start speaking on behalf of the Eblingham Parish Council and in fact also the residents. I think it's fair to say that from the outset, the owner has sought to engage with both the Parish Council and the residents. And indeed, Councillor Waller and myself have attended several meetings. The Parish Council made several suggestions. The major one that it should remain as a public facility for the golf, because that was not the original intention, and that has been changed, and therefore the Parish Council basically raising no objections. But I think it is again incumbent upon me to speak again and to mention on behalf of the residents and the farm that the intentions which have been set out to establish the various extra planting, the reduction of noise and the use of the road, I think that is paramount to any agreement going forward. And I think we've heard from the agent that it is the intention to do just that, but I can only stress that that is very important, and I hope that will be taken forward if this application is approved. And I think I'll rest there, if I may.
Well, do come back later should you wish to do so, Councillor. Sorry, I'm looking around for anyone else who wishes to speak. Councillor Gordon Brown.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions to the officers on this particular issue. One is, in the event that this site fails because it's not commercial, are we at risk in having a development that could be turned into residential? And if so, what are the implications of that in terms of planning policy? Is that a possibility under planning policy? Question number one. Question two, and that relates to the note in the conditions this relates to item 5, condition 5, a landscape management plan, etc., etc., etc. And then notes to applicant number 2, other mitigation measures specified in section 6 must be followed. I'd just like to be clear that the must be followed is a condition and it's not just a note to the applicant. I'd just like to be clear on that, if that's, you know, legally, where do we stand on that? Is it an absolute condition, you must follow paragraph 6 of the ecological report, or is it guidance?
I was going to say,
I'm all right to take that one. I think the last part, I'll take that one first. It's done as an informative. If members want that to be changed to a condition, we can amend it to a condition and enforceable. So that's easily addressed. The other issue about the housing side of things, obviously we have an application that's before us that we have to consider on that basis, and nobody has a crystal ball as to what may or may not happen in the future. Clearly, if it was to fail, then we would have to judge it against our policies that are in place at that time. At the moment, that isn't a location where we would be looking for housing as such. Although that may or could change, as members are aware, we've got Wolf Fox Garden Village that may or may not happen at some point in the future. But like I say, the key answer is, it would be assessed on the policies at that time. Currently, we would be seeking to resist such an application.
Chair, on that basis, I would like to propose an amendment that we have paragraph 6 included within the condition 5, paragraph 6 of the ecological report as a condition.
I think I certainly will. I mean, I think probably the way forward is to hear if there's anyone else on debate. When it comes to an actual motion, then well, whoever poses and says.
Transforming chair so that members know that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Councillor Oxley.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I have concerns about this application. Whilst I think it's a laudable to add to the offer to encourage people to come to Rutland. I think that looking at the site and the way that the houses are laid out in the master plan, it does look a bit crowded. That's the word that I would say when I looked at the plan, the block plan as proposed. And if they were houses, I think we might be tempted to say that it's overdevelopment. Whilst these are holiday lets, it still looks, to me, it looks maximising the potential of the site, which they have to because it is a commercial site. But it does look a bit crowded. And I was just wondering about if, for example, if a fire was to take place, the proximity of one to the next might actually be detrimental to those who are staying. I mean, I can only judge on, for example, Barnsdale, where they have a Barnsdale Lodge. I mean, we've got the site there. The Barnsdale Lodge, there is more space between the lodges. It does look a bit crowded to me. And on balance, I think, and I've listened to what everybody else has said, points made about being able to feed everybody, that if it is full to capacity, there will have to be a lot of vehicle movements. So at the moment, I'm not that happy with the application. I can see that I can see where it's coming from, but I still have concerns about the number of people, the number of dwellings, number of lodges. I'll wait to hear what everybody else has to say, but I think there may be too many for me.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bailey.
Actually, just going on from what Mark was saying, actually, about fire risk and having people involved in a major incident in Suffolk, what discussions have been had with emergency services about potential alternative access if there's no access to the main driveway, access to water, etc., for fire engines and any emergency planning in general?
Could you answer that one, Mr. Hodgett, or do I ask Mr. Johnson?
The simple answer is no discussions have taken place, because those matters, as we've discussed before, are generally dealt with by the building regulations to ensure that fire safety is complied with. So that's not something that we would normally deal with. If I could just return to Councillor Oxley's point about the density. The density is actually very low compared with a housing site. As we know, modern houses tend to have no more than 2 or 3 metres between them, and I think the minimum on any of these that I could see just briefly is 5. Generally, they're 10 to 15 metres apart, these lodges. They may well be covered by site licensing, as would the lodges at Barnsdale Lodge, for instance, which do have minimum spacing requirements and requirements for fire safety as well.
Just making you're just making a point about the fire safety. You're saying that's clear legislation that's covered by building control. So we're not, as part of material consideration, should we really consider what we can do with the legislation?
Thank you.
I'll let Councillor Bailey come back and then take Councillor Andrew back.
I totally get a bit about fire regulations as far as lodges, etc. So But my question, I suppose, was as far as things such as access and alternative access to that. If that road is closed, which the plan in front of us is showing one road in, one road out.
Is that a question for the?
But it is a concern that, again, having been involved with this, that whether the alternative access was quite important to the emergency services.
There's going to need to be alternative. There'll be fire evacuation procedures there.
Chair, sorry, I'm afraid.
I'm obviously just dealing with it from the perspective of building control. We're not really involved with that, but those sorts of issues and fire evacuations and things will all be part of them being signed off anyway to be able to have people into those lodges. I mean, I can't specifically say, well, if that access is I presume there's going to be something on there to say that it can never be closed, or you know, it's got to be free.
So that would be further down the road.
Okay.
Councillor Andrew Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted, there's quite a lot of water involved in this proposal, and they're going to attract, as the agent said, families, etc. What provisions can we make for safety around those lakes? Obviously, young children and water are not a good mixture.
Chairman, I mean, I don't think we've had specific details of that. It wouldn't necessarily be something for planning. Obviously, the site owner will have general health and safety. Having been and stayed on a site with a number of similar sort of arrangement there, there are sometimes low-level, fencing, that sort of thing put around, but in most cases that wouldn't require planning permission.
Yes. Are there any other points that members would like to?
I've got another one, Chair.
Yes, please do.
Are those little brown bits around the outside of the lake, are they sort of fishing stands? Is that what they are?
These,
yeah.
some of them are actually jetties, and some of them are like sort of wooden patios. Those that project out over the water are designated or shown on the plan as jetties. So people presumably.
So the intention is to stop the lakes with some sort of trout or something.
Well, I don't know whether they do or not. It's up to the operator whether he wants to offer that to his guests. But generally, yeah, they are sort of decks that go across out onto the water, and the others are just terraces.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other members who wish to comment? If no one else wishes to, I'll just give a few comments myself. If you look at paragraph 34 in the report planning policy, I think the officer makes it quite clear that this is not a very straightforward, do we, don't we, approve, that some policies would support, some policies, possibly on sustainability, which I'll come on to in a second, would not particularly support. On the other hand, those supporting are looking at the economic benefits. And again, I'll come on to that a shade later. I did notice that the residents quite reasonably were concerned about the security aspect of that amount of, I say traffic in the sense of both vehicular and human traffic. I did ask in briefing to clarify with the officers that in fact there will be staff on that main building in effect 24/7. And I mean, personally, were I a resident in those adjacent buildings, that would give me considerable reassurance on that particular point. And then if you look at paragraphs 40 and 43, I think there's absolutely an implication for the whole of Rutland not just for this application. Paragraph 40, as you see, says there is no definition of unacceptable in the policy. I think, members, when we are coming to look at the local plan and possibly offering some modifications, that is one of the things that personally I would like to see at least some guidance over what is acceptable. Because as we all know, and then paragraph 43 really just endorses that with the possible arrival of electric cars and so on and so forth. So the type of activity would be there. But I do feel, members, that this really has got Rutland-wide implications as well as the merits. And I'm sure I'm looking to my right, but we consider this on its merits. But you've got reference there to the fact that the immediate environs of Rutland Water would not be an acceptable location for this development. You have got, what as I understand it, it's reasonably clear from the report, you've got a failing rural business in terms of a golf course, which new owners, the applicant, has now come in with a suggestion of something that would make it viable. And I must say, I know we're not strictly supposed to use the term on balance, but it is for the colloquial convenience, shall we say, that if you're looking at it from a balance point of view and taking it into the context of Rutland, I feel that it is, with all the reservations that we've been expressing, personally, I would feel it was acceptable, but I'll wait to take a proposal from members, and again, bearing in mind that there are one suggestion that an advice note becomes a condition, and again, the very fact that I think there were 15 conditions, I think, Councillor Beggar, yours would be number 16, and it's quite possible tweaking the numbers. It is a very large number of conditions. And I think, again, members have perfectly reasonably made it clear to the agent that they would expect those conditions to be carried out not only to the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. And again, I'll take what the local councillor said, that the applicant has made efforts, and I see it in the report as well, to engage with the local councils and to make sure that those facilities, to some extent at any rate, are available for local use. And in that sense, as I say, I will now wait to see who is prepared to propose what.
Could I?
It certainly can, Maxwell.
Something else as well. With this project, I think we should be looking at it now, looking at projects now, to make them carbon neutral as far as possible, with the timescale of course. And I think we should be actually putting something into the planning about this. I mean, we're going down the road, we've got a climate change action, and we should be acting on it already.
I think if I could come back to it.
Yeah.
I would say that is what you were just mentioning now. I think when you're looking at your local plan policies, that is something that certainly you would be.
I think we should put something into this planning and start down that road.
And then
really.
When they're making plan application, people are aware what is expected.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm looking to my legal advice for this. I suspect at the moment, which is why I mentioned the local plan and planning policy, we haven't actually got anything articulated in quite that way, which is again why I drew attention to paragraph 40. And I think, as I say, to a certain extent, Councillor Buxby, I think we are relying on the good intentions of the applicant, who has, and the agent has reinforced that tonight, I would be perfectly happy if we could put those in. I suspect we can't. Well, it's no longer, oh, well, it's not yet in the local plan. But I would certainly be pushing for that to be in that local plan. And it's one, I mean, I know that it's a much wider issue, but the whole environment.
Once we put it into the local plan, would it automatically affect planning that's already been passed?
No. The quick answer is, sorry.
Sorry.
Chairman, if I could come
Yeah.
back, I think, Councillor Bransby, I think what I would suggest is if you speak to the planning policy manager, Roger Ranson, obviously we're going through the process of the local plan at the moment, he'll be able to tell you what policies are in there. If that plan is changed or available to be changed, then that is the opportunity to do it. So speak to Roger about it. Once the policies are adopted, then they're material planning considerations, and it is at that point that myself and Nick will be writing reports to you saying that it complies with that policy or not. Okay, thank you.
I'm still waiting for the proposal. Councillor Gordon Brown.
Chairman, I'd be happy to propose the recommendation, but with the 2 amendments, the one which has been brought forward on the addendum tonight, plus an amendment suitably worded to include section 6 of the ecology report, I think as condition 5. I think it could be easily moved and melded into that in a similar way that's in the note.
It would either be within condition 5 or as a separate condition on its own, but we can make sure that happens, Chairman.
Members are clear what we're voting for, and I think again it might be something that so long as we've got the spirit right, that's something that could be dealt with the finer details in the outside the meeting. Thank you. So I have a proposal. Do I have a second, please? Councillor Beggy, and all those in favour, please.
That's 6 for the motion, Chair.
6 for the motion. Against and abstentions.
Recorded, please.
Recorded abstention, Councillor Oxley. Well, thank you very much indeed. Members of the public are very welcome to stay for the next quick item, which is I'll come to in a moment. But if you wish to go, please do at this point. I'll just pause for a moment if you wish to pass it. So we've got item, item 6, the appeals. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. No new appeals received since the last meeting. We have had one appeal decision, which is the land at Hollywell Road in Clipsham, which was for a proposed grain store and access track. That was dismissed. The concern there was with regards to the amount of works that were required for the access. However, in the meantime, we've also had an application that was submitted and I believe has recently been approved for the grain store, but with a different access arrangement, which is in line with the appeal decision. The appeal inspector didn't have an issue with the grain store itself. It was more about the access track, which they're using, I think, an existing arrangement now.
Fine. Thank you. And if we can then move to item 8, any other urgent business, if I could just say, Councillor Banksby asked me about a particular point just before this meeting. Councillor Banksby, what I was going to suggest now, I've got a question that Councillor Brown had previously.
Mine has been resolved, Chairman. I've resolved my question.
You've resolved it?
I have.
Thank you very much indeed. What I was going to suggest, members, and I was going to suggest that this comes to the next meeting to give the officer time. Would it be reasonable to say to you as members, if you have got an item of urgent business Would by 12 noon on the Monday be reasonable, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah.
I mean, that just gives the 24 hours, because I think the worst possible thing is if one of us asks a question, the officer may well have the answer back somewhere or on the computer somewhere, but I think it's more efficient if they have at least 12, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, any other business is at the discretion of the chairman.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a very good suggestion, the chair, but I think we need to have it set somewhere, perhaps if we go to CRWG, so that we can actually set a specific time scale rather than doing it on the hoof.
I would be very happy with that, and I think at the moment the particular paragraph is simply lifted from the council constitution and standing orders. So again, if you're happy with in consultation with Mr. Johnson, will put forward word, which of course we will run past the necessary authorities. And you're absolutely right, Councillor, obviously, that we have it clear so that everybody knows where they are.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, sorry,
If
Councillor
I'm not
Gordon.
mistaken, the Constitutional Review Working Group had agreed to review all planning procedures, and therefore that could be part of that review, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you very much.
For that to be done.
Yes,
But in the meantime, we can keep.
thank you. Yes, in that case, it might well be. I think the Constitution Working Party is first week of September, so it may not be in place for the next planning meeting, which is the end of August. But there are one or two familiar faces from that committee around the table. So at that rate, I think it is just on 8 o'clock. I'm not sure. 1 minute past. I'll close the meeting, but I have got some details on the enforcement. Again, officers, well, 2 officers anyway, if they wish to depart, by all means do. And if I just can't remember the public to depart as well, thank you.